This project reconstructs the South Theatre at Hadrian's Villa and situates it within its broader landscape and cultural context, using comparison with the Greek theatre to explore how spatial and decorative features may reflect different modes of performance and audience experience. We begin at the Greek theatre, located within gardens and terraces at Hadrian's Villa, with stairs between the terraces. Unlike a traditional civic Greek theatre, the structure is embedded within a designed landscape rather than a public urban setting. Its placement suggests that it functioned not only as a performance space, but also as part of a broader cultural and visual experience within the villa. Although it adopts the general form of a Greek theatre, its integration into this environment reflects adaptation rather than direct replication. Inside the theater, the scale becomes immediately apparent. With a capacity of roughly 2,900 to 3,600 spectators, the Greek theater is a large-scale structure designed for collective viewing. Architecturally, it includes a pulpitum, a scene franz, a semicircular orchestra, and a cavea divided into seating sections by a central aisle, with access provided through multiple entrance passageways. At the top of the seating area, a pulvinar, or imperial box, suggests a space for elite viewing within the larger audience. The sides of the cavea are supported on vaults, which form rooms likely for props. The decorative program includes large marble representations of tragedy and comedy, not displayed here, linking the space to classical dramatic traditions. The reconstruction was primarily based on the 1956 Gismondi relief model at the Adriana Visitors Center. Considering the recommencement of various excavation efforts in the 2000s, new archaeological evidence has been uncovered that's not reflected there or here in this reconstruction, such as the facade of the theater being wider than the theater itself. The Greek theater's architectural design and decorative program together suggest a deliberate engagement with classical theatrical traditions, while the structure adopts elements of both Greek and Roman theater architecture, forming a hybrid design. The presence of tragedy and comedy imagery directly references established theatrical genres. This combination of architectural reinterpretation and symbolic decoration indicates that the space was conceived in relation to formal dramatic performance, rather than as a purely generic entertainment venue. To explore how the space might have been used, I staged a scene inspired by the myth of Hippolytus, a popular Greek tragedy, with AI-generated models from a neoclassical painting of this myth. Because direct evidence for performance at the site is limited, AI provides a way to translate broader cultural traditions into a plausible visual interpretation. In this scene, Hippolytus rejects Phaedra, prompting her emotional reaction while Theseus observes the unfolding conflict. This sequence reflects a structured interaction typical of tragic performance, where narrative is conveyed through clear relationships between characters. The gestures are intentionally simplified and sequential, aligning with what is known about ancient theater, where performances needed to be clearly understood by large audiences, requiring them to be visually clear and easily readable. While performers in this context may have worn masks considering their amplifying ability, they are not shown here to emphasize gesture and interaction. As we move away from the Greek theater and along this path, the spatial relationship between the two theaters becomes clear. In fact, scholars have referred to their divergent locations as having an almost polar disposition, evident above all in the north-south sector. Likewise, the accessibility of the two theaters varies. The Greek theater is proximal to architecture-like temples and access via above-ground passageways, while the South Theater is positioned at the edge of the villa and accessed through underground tunnels. Here we arrive at the South Theater. This reconstruction is based primarily on Brennan's digital survey, which provides detailed architectural and decorative evidence. At the top of the seating axis is a small temple, reinforcing the structured and intentional design of the space and suggesting a connection between performance and symbolic or ritual elements. The structure includes a clearly defined stage, scene franz, and cavea, as well as a small temple positioned at the top of the seating axis. The theater was also extensively decorated, with the scene franz featuring statues of the Muses and a frieze of tragic masks, linking the structure to theatrical and larger performative traditions. Together, these architectural and decorative elements create a more enclosed and highly articulated spatial environment, unlike the Greek theater that is integrated into a broader landscape. Inside the South Theater, the scale is much smaller, accommodating approximately 1,100 to 1,200 spectators. The seating is organized around a clearly defined stage, with the cavea clearly positioned to the performance area. The orchestra was paved in opus sectile and the seating finished in white marble, emphasizing both the visual refinement and the design nature of the space. Rather than accommodating large-scale viewing, the design emphasizes direct visual engagement. The use of subsurface circulation, not found at any other theaters of the villa or in other Roman theaters more broadly, may indicate a more controlled mode of access, further suggesting the idea that this space was designed for a more contained and carefully structured audience experience. The modeling of different performance types in these spaces is informed by their distinct decorative programs. In the Greek theater, the presence of comedy and tragedy imagery points to established dramatic genres, while in the South theater, the inclusion of the muses suggests a broader association with music, dance, and performance. To represent how the space might have been used, I modeled a pantomime performance. Pantomime in the Roman world was a form of performance in which a single actor conveyed narrative through gesture and movement, often drawing on mythological stories. It functioned as a primary medium through which audiences encounter canonical myth, with the solo performer embodying multiple roles through movement and minimal changes in costume or mask. Pantomime also became one of the most popular forms of performance in the Roman Empire, and under Hadrian, pantomime performers were actively supported and integrated into imperial culture, highlighting the importance of this medium within elite society. In this scene, the exaggerated pose and controlled motion reflect this emphasis on bodily expression, where meaning is communicated visually rather than through spoken dialogue. The architectural character of the South Theater supports this interpretation. Its smaller scale, enclosed form, and closer relationship between audience and performer create a setting in which gesture and movement would be especially affected. The decorative program, particularly the presence of the muses, further reinforces this connection to performance traditions centered on movement and visual storytelling. This is not a reconstruction of a specific performance, but a plausible scenario informed by both the architectural features of the space and the known characteristics of Roman pantomime, in which visual storytelling played a central role. Returning to the full view of the villa, we can now see how these two theaters function in relation to one another. The Greek theater, centrally located and large in scale, reflects engagement with classical dramatic traditions and collective viewing. The South theater, smaller and more controlled, suggests a more intimate and flexible performance environment. Lastly, I'd like to note that an important aspect of this project is the reconstruction process itself. The Greek theater model incorporates AI-assisted modeling based on multiple visual inputs, primarily including the Gismondi relief model, while the South theater is more directly grounded in archaeological scholarship, particularly the Brennan dissertation. Because of this, the models carry different levels of certainty. The overall forms are based on evidence, but in some details, such as the columns in the Greek theater not having any sort of decoration, reflect the limitations of visual data and modeling tools. Likewise, the absence of direct evidence for performance at the site, AI-assisted modeling makes it possible to reconstruct and visualize specific performance traditions, such as the Hippolytus narrative from tragedy and the gesture-based conventions of pantomime, reflected in the actors incorporated into the scene. Returning to the intention of this reconstruction, rather than treating the South Theater in isolation, this project uses the Greek theater as a comparative model to better understand how differences in scale, placement, and decoration shape performance and audience experience. By placing these structures in dialogue, the South Theater can be interpreted not simply as a smaller theater in isolation, but as a space that supports potentially a broader mode of performances. In doing so, the project demonstrates how digital reconstruction can move beyond visualization to become a tool for interpreting how performance was experienced within Hadrian's villa. In developing these reconstructions, the process itself became as revealing as the final models. The landscape was generated from a topographic map overlaid with the villa's broader plan, while the theaters emerged through a hybrid workflow combining AI-assisted modeling and manual reconstruction. In the Greek theater, although AI accelerated early stages, especially when trained on multiple views of the Gismondi model, it proved unreliable in key architectural areas. Doorway voids, surface textures, and consistent geometry were often misinterpreted or hallucinated, requiring iterative correction. As a consequence, the final model is a composite. Seating, scene, and facades were selectively merged from multiple outputs, while architectural features such as doorways and pilaster textures were added manually. At the same time, relying on a single reference model, or even a limited set of models, introduces its own limitations. This approach risks reinforcing a narrow interpretation of the site, potentially obscuring alternative scholarly reconstructions and the inherent uncertainty in the archaeological record. In this sense, the use of AI not only required technical refinement, but also critical evaluation of its underlying assumptions and sources. A similar pattern of compromise and decision-making shaped the South Theater reconstruction. Modeled by hand in Blender, it remains intentionally low poly, meaning that documented decorative elements, such as tragic mask, are absent. Additionally, discrepancies in scholarly interpretations, particularly regarding stair placement and subterranean passageways, required interpretive choices rather than definitive reconstruction. In both cases, the models reflect not a single authoritative version, but a series of informed decisions made within constraints of evidence, tools, and time. This iterative process underscored a central challenge in digital archaeology. Reconstruction is not simply a technical reproduction, but interpretive argument. Each adjustment, whether correcting AI-generated geometry or choosing between competing scholarly layouts, required balancing accuracy, clarity, and feasibility. Through this process, I became more aware of how uncertainty is not eliminated but managed, and how digital tools can both eliminate and obscure the past. Finally, while this project proposes hypotheses about the types of performances that may have taken place in each theater, these conclusions remain provisional. They are grounded in architectural form and literary evidence of popular Roman performance genres, yet these spaces were multifunctional. Roman theaters could host pantomime, musical performances, civic gatherings, and ceremonial events, in addition to stage drama, reminding us that their cultural role extended beyond any single type of spectacle. Thank you.